shall dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Be wise now, therefore, O ye kings. Be instructed, you judges of the kingdom.
Good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing the book of Psalms, chapter 41, or Psalm 41, I should say. And, what's funny is if it wasn't enough that the chapter divisions very often are very arbitrary in all the other books of the Bible where there are no chapters, but in the book of Psalms, even where we have distinctive, intentional divisions, there is not exactly a controversy because I don't know, I've never heard. The thing is, I'm just pointing out to the chief musician actually belongs with the previous psalm, in my opinion. And also in the opinion of some scholars, but apparently not everybody, because even modern Bibles maintain this closing as I've suggested many times, as part of the next psalm, and maybe because it's traditional, It's like people who object to certain aspects of the King James being changed simply because it's the King James, because it's been done that way for hundreds of years, and now it's changed. And when someone changes it, it almost seems like wrong, because once people become accustomed to a certain thing, they just don't want to change. Anyways, and I've talked about why I think that Habakkuk chapter 3 being a good example of a psalm independent from the rest of the psalms. And in that case, the to, and there's to the chief singer, occurs at the end of the psalm. And at the beginning, it's a prayer of Habakkuk the prophet upon Shigionoth, etc. And we have a psalm of David. Blessed is he that considereth the poor. The Lord will deliver him in time of trouble. The Lord will preserve him and keep him alive, and he shall be blessed upon the earth, and thou wilt not deliver him unto the will of his enemies. And here, blessed is he that considereth the poor. I wonder what the word considereth is in the... I want to do this right, though. Let's see. Properly engineered. There we are. Not exactly proper, but he considereth. What do we consider? Sakal. And it says the quick definition given there. It says to consider. I wish that pop-up would show for everybody else. On Bible Hub, when you hover over a word in the King James Version plus Strong's section, which I prefer, which is it's like having the Strong's Concordance open immediately, and then you can just, it's having your Bible. It's like having a Green's Interlinear with the definitions hot linked, and without the distraction of seeing the actual Hebrew or having to read it backwards. To be prudent. That's what it says here. A primitive root to be causatively. I don't have it right there. I like the Strong's definition just because. To be causatively make or act circumspect and hence intelligent. Consider. It's interesting they called it prudent. Well, maybe depending on the use, prudent and consider could be considered, very similar ideas, though in English they have a little different feel, if you ask me. And, I would think that most people would consider that, like, being prudent about the poor is not exactly what this means. I mean, just by context, because we know that, prudent, in our mindset means almost like reserved, right? It has a sense of reservation, and it does have the idea of circumspection in it, but it almost goes more into an idea of circumspect with a reserve. but considers the poor is more like, looks to their needs and stuff. And maybe prudent fits in its basic definition, but not in the way I'm used to thinking of the idea of prudence. But, it can be prudent in terms of like God, his eyes are upon the poor. As Jesus said, you have the poor you always have with you. One of the things they say about people, they say, you look at someone, how they treat people who are under them. People who they view as beneath them, or who are their inferiors, maybe in a work atmosphere, right? They're subordinates, in other words, when you give someone a little power over someone, and see how they act, and that'll tell you a lot about them. It'll tell you a lot. Because someone who mistreats someone who's in their power is that's an untrustworthy person. They can't. Like they're given the power, they immediately abuse it. Maybe not immediately, but they abuse the power they have over other people when they can. Someone who uses their power to their advantage is a very, they're dangerous. Like you can't trust them with power. And so, it's one of those things in life that God looks at. How do you treat people? How do you treat the poor? Whatever poor, poverty has different meanings in different times. It's like, we don't have poor the way we used to. Poor used to really mean poor. Now it's hard to consider the poor too much, because the poor are just not as rich as the rich. I've said before, it's like, I remember a long time ago realizing that when I had, I forgot how many kids I checked this at, honestly. I remember I used to worry about taxes when I was young because I owed them. But then as I got kids, at least, income tax. I still worry about taxes. I got to pay all kinds of taxes. Income tax, not so much because of the deductions from the dependents, right? As you get kids, each one gives you a deduction from the taxes you owe, at least income tax. Still got to pay 100% of the self-employment tax, I'll tell you that. If you're self-employed, you still pay that, because that's basically Social Security, and you don't get out of that, and that's like a 15% tax, okay? So, it doesn't matter how poor you are, you still pay your taxes, at least as far as that goes. And I know that's technically my retirement plan, but it's questionable what exactly what's going to be there in another 100 years anyways, and I won't be here either, so I don't have another 100 years. But it's been a long time questioned that, but what I'm saying is, poor people in our country, what I discovered is when I did my taxes that, like, at some point I looked at them like I would have to make almost 6 figures before I would owe income tax. I'm like, wow, that's how many. When you have 8 kids, that's a lot of deductions. So I was like somewhere up near the 6-figure range. And in fact, someone told me that if you live in San Francisco, the poverty line is at 100,000. I've never made 6 figures in my life. I got close one year, a long time ago. And it was close. It was not really close, like 70,000 is not close to 6 figures as far as I'm concerned. It's closer than the numbers I've been turning in recent years. But the point is, poverty looks different in our country. And so it's hard. You don't see poor people. Like, you can't see them. Like, if you for the most part, like, if you go to the store, you don't, like, see the poor. You'd have to inquire about it. You have to go someplace where they're like, where their purpose is to help the poor, and then find some poor people, and you could go help them. Because our country has already done so much to help them, to assure that they don't starve, especially, families with kids and stuff and women with children. They're very well taken care of. Men, not so much. That's why the homeless problem is a male problem to a great degree, to a large degree anyways, because it's definitely not a child problem. I mean, a woman with child problem. I know there are teenagers and runaways who are homeless and in poverty. And so, and there's different thought processes about what being poor means. You know what I mean? It can, in fact, let's look at the meaning of the word. It probably means something like depressed or, let's see. Let's see what it means. What it means is, there we go. Consider the poor and whatever. I had the quick definition. I'm going to bring up. Doll. What was this? Definition, adore. This is why I don't trust these definitions up at the top here. It's like, what? So let's go. Adjective, low, weak, poor, thin. Especially common in the wisdom literature. From Dalal, meaning the Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. That's the wisdom literature. Or the wisdom is Psalms. Wisdom would be like Ecclesiastes and Proverbs, whereas obviously they meant poetry would be the Psalms. The wisdom literature is like Psalms, Proverbs. I keep saying Psalms. It's like Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. Song of Solomon is even probably, that'd be more poetry. Properly, it means, according to Strong, dangling, by implication, weak or thin. Lean, needy, poor. Never when it says properly, the proper meaning, it means like just the base meaning. That means like literally. A lot of times we have words that are just literally it means this, but that's not how we use it. I'm trying to think of an example right off the top of my head, but I don't. Where it's like the colloquial usage or the normal usage is slightly different than if you looked at the word in a hyper-literal way. Well, the proper definition is not necessarily the right definition in context. Obviously, it means poor. But through the idea of weakness or thinness. And leanness means you don't have enough to eat. You don't have enough money. It's like, I'm lean, I'm thin, I got very little substance to me. It's the opposite of fat. And so I would take it overall as to mean like someone whose life is very austere, without a lot of substance, without a lot of fat, without a lot of things. That's the poor. Now, of course, in the worldwide, there's still plenty of poverty, like real grinding, awful struggle to survive poverty in Africa, in Southeast Asia, and in many other parts of the world, the islands of the sea, and various places, throughout the world. I'm not going to try to name them, South America, North America, there are places, outside of, but there are places where there's true poverty, grinding poverty. And the thing is, it's like the world's problems are a lot to take care of. I'm never sure exactly, what do I say? The best thing for the poor, as far as I can tell from what I've learned in my life, is that they could be free from the encumbrances of, a lot of the poverty is because the systems they live under don't give people the freedom to make their way in life. And so they're poverty stricken because, they can't. Sometimes it's true because of famine or some circumstances come, a natural disaster, it puts people into poverty. But if people's governments are oppressing them, it creates poverty. As warlords and their cronies enrich themselves, the people in those countries, under those dictatorships, usually socialist dictatorships, the people suffer grinding poverty because the cronies of the leadership all enrich themselves and steal the wealth of the nation and then leave the common folk with absolutely nothing. and or very little, and then, and grind them and destroy them because all they care about is themselves and enriching themselves. And so we live in a nation that has considered the poor, and even in other nations, whatever we can do that would genuinely help. Like I said, one of the things you got to do when you want to help the poor, it doesn't say blessed is he that helpeth the poor. That's not. I'm not going to deny that. But I'm saying no. Blessed is he that considereth the poor. Consider, because it's not enough to intend good. We've done a lot of things in our country that intended good that didn't work out quite as good as we hoped. We had a war on poverty in the 60s, and they still talk about poverty. But it's like I said, in LA, not LA, and over in San Francisco, if you make less than $100,000 a year, you're in poverty. Why? Because the housing costs are through the roof. Okay. But that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money to be in poverty. So I'm a little bit skeptical about our poverty rates here in the States. I'm a little bit skeptical. As being near the bottom, I can tell you, I'm all right. Because the thing is, having food and raiment, let us be there with content. It doesn't make you secure in the world's eyes. A lot of people in the world, they desire security. They love to have that savings account just filled up with money, The idea of being someone with no savings, living not from paycheck to paycheck, but from job to job, is more than they can bear. They need to feel they have the security under their feet, and I definitely appreciate that. As far as I understand people's desires to feel safe. But no one is truly safe in this world because God is always watching. People say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them. They start kicking the poor. They say, who sees us, who knows us? And God is watching. So God blesses those who consider the poor. And the Lord will deliver him in times of trouble. Because God loves the poor. God loves the needy. And, and people say, well, if he loves them so much, why does he let them be poor and needy? It's like, let them be poor and needy. Again, everything is considered relative. Like, meaning a man who lived 5,000, or let's say 5,000 is not a good number, whatever. A man living 5,000 years ago, by his wits, with no technology, he's virtually the same as a homeless person. A man hunting and gathering, in the wild. There was a time when all men were as poor as our poorest. It is only because of envy that we look at it the way we do. But God looks at it also in terms of ability. That when we have the ability to do good, we ought to do it. It's like to do good. You may intend good. It's not good to just, sometimes people think we'll just throw money at the problem. Well, that's not good because you know why? Most of the money they're throwing at the problem doesn't even belong to them. They have to take it from other people first. When you take other people's money to do good, you have some kind of responsibility to check if what you did had the intended consequences or whether it didn't work, whether it did harm. And people in government don't care. It doesn't. Solving problems doesn't matter. What it is getting into power and being perceived to do things while you make yourself rich. That's what politics often is. For many people, they go into politics to get power so they can enrich themselves. And they tell us stuff and they do stuff so that they look busy and like they're solving problems when really they're just ruining everything slowly. They are slowly ruining everything. All of them. All of them. You know what I mean? Because even the most well-intentioned, and I think our current president is well-intentioned, but still, it's like None of the trends that are destroying us are reversed. And I don't know that there's anything anyone can do about it until it's too late. Because I think it's like human population. It's not like one man who can just decide, he's getting to be 500 pounds and he needs to lose weight to save his life. A man can decide that. How does a country decide that? We're getting too fat. We need to cut back. Where exactly shall we cut back? Who are you going to take the money away from? And I'm too political, but it almost I get political because it says about the poor. It's like I want to consider the poor because I want God to deliver me in time of trouble. But I got to look hard to find people poorer than me. I got to look outside the country mostly. Or look at, people living on city streets. I mean, that's where I got to go. I mean, I've been saying, people have been good to me. There were times when I was saved from losing my home, and I would have been potentially on the streets. Though obviously it didn't happen because I had family or other loved ones that were helpful, that kept us off that kind of a trajectory. And I guess I stumble a little there because it's like, okay, how, I want this blessing. Now there's also spiritual poverty. We've talked about that before. Spiritual poverty. Jesus said, happy are the poor in spirit. But there are different ways of gauging that. When we talk about leanness, you can be lean in all kinds of ways. We can be lean. We always think of money first, and I'm not going to pass up money. But we talked about it. What about other kinds of poverty? Spiritual poverty. Someone who's, this is where I try to be pitiful towards people who are maybe not good people. Like they have a deficit of kindness. They're bitter. They have a deficit. They don't have God. They don't have the Lord. You can think of it that way. It's like they don't know our Lord. Oh, the riches of both the knowledge and wisdom that is in God. How his ways are past finding out. My wife has reminded me many times that I am very wealthy when it comes to the things of God. He's blessed me. I'm child rich. I have effortlessly produced 8 children. There was some effort, but I'm thinking about there are people who can't have kids for one reason or the other. They don't get pregnant every time they slip on a piece of soap. I don't know why I said slip on a piece of soap. But they don't. But it doesn't happen. They go to fertility clinics for years trying to have that baby. And I know they've gotten a lot better at fertility, I think, or they end up having a surrogate or something, There's something desperately missing. They're poor in their way. Spiritually, people who don't know God, or that are scripture poor, they don't have knowledge, And maybe for me, sharing what I know from the Bible is part of considering the poor, considering people who don't know, considering people who've never been through the Psalms, considering people who haven't been instructed. There are all kinds of ways you can look at people in terms of have and have not beyond just simple money. And I would encourage you to always think in that terms. Like when you're confronting an enemy, you could also look at them as poor, as impoverished, as morally bankrupt, so to speak. That doesn't mean, when you're dealing with someone who is morally bankrupt, you gotta be careful that they don't steal from you in a sense. You don't become a victim of their immoral impulses. They're thieving or they're stealing or whatever it happens to be that they're embroiled in their bankruptcy and their lack of moral character and their lack of knowledge. Be careful because they can obviously, like it says, don't cast your pearls before swine because they're going to turn again and rip you, then trot them under feet, because they don't know pearls from peas. Except you can't eat pearls, so it's less interesting to a pig. You know, why would a pig take interest in pearls? You can't eat them. Well, you can't eat them, I guess, right? They would eat them, but they're not for eating. The Lord will preserve him and keep him alive, and he shall be blessed upon the earth, and thou wilt not deliver him to the will of his enemies. The man that is, and the general thing in this is he's saying the one who considers other people, and thinks of someone beyond himself, especially those beneath him. Because, people will consider their superiors. Well, what will the king think? What will the king think? Oh, what will the big important person think? Everyone defers to the big important person. But what about to the little guy who doesn't matter? Oh, the little guy who doesn't matter, nobody cares. But we see that God loves those who are not well off. You know what I mean? Look at the Apostle Paul. He's a great example because, a lot of times we think of, I don't have a lot of natural, I call it, I don't want to say forgiveness, though I could say it, a lot of natural. I don't know. I'm not particularly inclined to be gracious to my enemies. You know what I mean? It's one thing someone who's beneath me, like just in, like someone who's in a worse state, I can definitely sympathize and be kind. But it's sometimes hard to see the enemy as being in a worse state. Sometimes the enemy, all we can, you become disinclined because, hey, this person is trying to hurt me. Love your enemies. Because this is another imprecatory psalm where he's like basically saying, bring the harsh punishment on the evil, or at least protect me from those who would destroy me, obviously, because I consider poor people and people who are needy. The Apostle Paul in his way was needy. He was destitute of truth and seeking, he was seeking to do things that would actually be harmful to him, in the judgment of God. Like, if you're persecuting my believers, that's not profitable for Paul. I mean, that's a spiritually empty thing to do. And he was blind, because another thing, like the blind and the maimed, and be nice to blind people and to the crippled. We got to consider that those who we despise are often blind. That's why I lost some of my anger in the past against enemies when I realized I don't know who's an enemy ultimately, because God is working all things, and the Apostle Paul looked like an enemy. He acted like an enemy. He did everything enemies do. And then God struck him down the road to Damascus and changed his mind. And he became not an enemy. You know what I mean? So while, I think that being, and while we should love our enemies and consider them also because they are often blind, they are not just malevolent. Because Paul did those things thinking he was doing well. And many of our enemies in life are not true enemies. They just are other people who think they're doing well. And unfortunately, I feel like we live in a time in society when people who just disagree about things, who both intend good, at least mean they're well-meaning, look at each other as complete enemies and, as evil. In politics, the other side is evil now. As far as that's how they're looked at. If you're on one side, the other side they're the evil ones. Though not universally so, but I mean, not everyone doesn't share that opinion. But you see a lot of it. You see a lot of that. And really, all it is maybe they just don't see your point of view, or maybe we're all wrong. We just don't know what we're doing. And that's a distinct possibility. But, we all are blind in our way, or can be. I mean, I never presume my own clarity of vision on every issue. What fool does? You know what I mean? I'd be a fool to do so. So I don't have clarity of vision on every issue. I don't know the answer to every issue. That's why, for the most part, I usually stayed out of politics, because I don't know the solution to the problems. I have no idea. I've only gotten involved this year because it came to my door. Not they, but I mean, it came to my door. They came, I got, all of a sudden, they involved all of us in politics. Because it's all politics. They're locking people down for some silly disease. Even when they had polio, they didn't lock the society down. When kids were getting, mumps, measles, mumps, and rubella, they still went to school. And those diseases were far deadlier, and they killed children. Childhood diseases. Terrible. And we've cured them, but you know what I mean? But they used to go to school with them. My grandmother, I think she told me that there were 8 kids, but only 5 survived to adulthood. And in fact, was it 4? There were more, or was it 5 and there was 4 that survived? I forget. I think it was 3 sisters. There were 3. I forget. I have to go look back at her. I have to ask my dad or something. But anyways, I know I have the baby book of my grandmother's older sister who died. And she died as an infant. Pneumonia, And such it is in life, people just don't have the perspective. The thing, we're living in this safety culture. I've been talking about recording it, but I've been just meditating on this. This safety culture is just terrible. This culture of fear, and we don't want to breathe the same air with other people. It's bizarre. Especially considering, it's like I said, did I say this? I don't think I said this, but they say, well, I heard on the radio, what did they say? The framing really angers me. Because the radio guy was like, this deadly disease claimed, 8 lives in Illinois yesterday. People died from COVID. I forget how many. It wasn't a big number. But they framed it in such a, this loss to the dread, And this is a news report. This is not like an opinion. This is supposed to be just straight news on the straight news station on the radio. The station is 780 out of Chicago, WBM, and it's always pretty straight-laced as far as, they're always slanted a bit. Everything's slanted a bit because the copy editors have an opinion too, I guess. But anyways, they said this, they never provide context. How many people died of heart attacks yesterday? How many people died slipping on soap? How many people got shot? How many people died in car accidents? I want to know all the deaths. How many people died yesterday? Just normally. How many people die in a given day? I don't remember if I mentioned this in the study, but in 2016, I think it was, or 15, because I was looking up the statistics. I just want to know how many people die in a given year. 57 million was 16 or 15 or something. 57 million people died in that year. And it wasn't an outlier. It was just a normal year. It's just, we lose that's how many deaths are expected in a normal year on planet Earth at our current population. Somewhere around 50 million, And like I said, everyone's afraid of something that's on par with car accidents and all accidents, I should say. In 2017, it was like 170,000 people died from accidents, including car. Half of them were automobile accidents, or not quite half. I think it was something like 40%. And another, basically like between falls and car accidents, it was like half of the accidental deaths preventable, and these were all preventable accidental deaths: falls, car accidents. And I said, well, you could fix both those by requiring everyone to wear a bicycle helmet all the time, and you could and by requiring the speed limit to be 30 miles an hour. I was watching the presidential debate last night. I couldn't stand it at some point because when they start talking about COVID, I just want to tear my eyeballs out, because they'll talk about the deaths and give no context, and they talk about all these things, but there's no context given. And they'll say, like, you should have stopped all this death. And it's like, well, we could stop all kinds of death. I want a national speed limit of 30 miles an hour. Make it 20 to be safe. I mean, don't you want people to be safe? Obviously, I'm being a little bit facetious here. But I mean, I also mean it, though. Is it so ridiculous? Is it too much to ask you to slow down your car? You will save 100,000 people about, somewhere shy of 100,000 every year. Over the course of a decade, you're going to save millions of lives by changing the speed limit to 20. You know what the leading cause of death is for young people? Car accidents. I think it's time we bring the speed limit down to 20 miles an hour nationally on all road surfaces, except for emergency vehicles, obviously, at times, but otherwise 20. And maybe we need to put little monitors on. Maybe just put governors on the cars so they can't go faster than 20. Don't you care about saving lives? I mean, but that's how they present this with this COVID-19. It was, don't you care about saving? We didn't save all the lives. We got to shut everything down and save lives. Shut everything down and say, well, why shut everything down? Just slow everything down. Slow the hell down. Stop driving so fast. Stop killing kids with your speed limits up in the 7. The speed limit on our highways in Illinois is 70 miles an hour. Do you know what happens to someone who gets into a collision at that speed? It isn't pretty. I don't get I don't like it because it's a lie. This safety stuff is like just they're deceiving you. It's an illusion, a delusion, and it's gripping the nation. I wanted to make just a video on that subject because it's bad. It's very bad. Safety culture is worse than cancel culture. Because cancel culture, they just come after you. Safety culture, they come after the world. They come after the whole world around you and try to change it. And part of me is it makes me almost ready to lose my mind when I think about just what this means. It is not good. The only way to really stay safe in life is to do the Lord's will, and the Lord will preserve you and keep him alive. That's that's one definition of salvation, as we talked about, that to be kept alive, to not die. When I was 19, I turned my heart to the Lord in the midst of my troubles, and I said, if you would just, that ear hurts, I got an infection. If you would just, save my life right now, I'll serve you forever. If it's, it's all I can offer. All I can offer is a lifetime of service because I have no other thing that God could possibly want from me, and I'm not even sure he wanted that. I'm glad he took it. Okay, here you go, kid. He saved my life. We want our lives to be saved, yes. And it's interesting this is put in here, right? Look at that verse. And the fact, remember, this is also the Psalm, like where it says, I thought we'd maybe finish this today, but I'm not even going to try. Right? And then it'll be done. But look at it. My own familiar friend whom I trusted, which did eat of my bread, hath lifted up his heel against me. That's Judas. That they use that verse to talk about Judas. The one with whom I dipped the sop is he that would betray me. Or betrayed by his friend. Right? And Jesus was delivered. And they killed him. But, from a certain perspective, from some people's perspective of the way they think about the way life and death works, no one ever gets killed. You just slaughter your body, and then you're just standing there as a spirit disembodied, like, whoa. Like I think I remember when there's some movie where they're killing the people, and then they're still, like, they're just, the ghost is just standing there after they die or something like that. I don't remember. I feel like I've seen that, like someone decided to portray that mentality, that idea that, like you'd almost like not even notice the fact that you got killed. Like your ghost should still be just standing there. Like if a pallet of bricks fell on you, like directly on you, and just completely crushed you instantly, like you'd be standing with your head outside the top of the bricks as a ghost, like looking around like, whoa, what happened? Uh-oh, like the mentality of some people. So there is no death, but in a sense, because God keeps us alive, right? After our bodies die. Well, I do think our body death is a real death, and et cetera, and how exactly our, people are always wondering about, well, between death and resurrection, what is the state of the soul? And I would say not experiencing anything. There's no experience, so there is, say, what are we doing? Sleeping, waiting? I've used the idea of waiting, of sleeping, because the Bible does, right? Waiting for the day of resurrection, sleeping in the dust. But those are earthly metaphors of experiential things. Like sleep is something you experience, even though you do it mostly unconsciously. But because it is unconscious, it's actually close to the idea of what we think death is like, which is an unconscious state where there is no experience. But God is not the God of the dead. God is the God of the living. Because in him, as it's written, all live. Or to him, actually. To him, all live to him. So when I die, I may not be experiencing anything, but to God, I'm still alive. Because his will is that I live, and on the day of resurrection, I will be raised. And you understand, from God's perspective, he is, as it says here, from everlasting to everlasting, calling the end from the beginning. We have a book of Revelation where John from the first century goes in and sees all the stuff that's happening at the end. Is it a vision? Did he travel into the future? Some people portray Revelation as if he did. I don't know. If it's possible for him to have at least been in the future in heaven with God, I certainly believe that God is in the future and God is in the past. And God transcends our time boundaries. Meaning, the time I live and the time I raise, to God is all like the same. There's no, he can differentiate, but what I'm saying? It's like he's not limited to like only being in one time at a time, one moment at a time. God is not limited to a single moment of time like we are. Like every moment, I have a linear progression of time from moment to moment. But God's time works differently. It's not linear. Non-linear time, I can't really wrap my mind around. But it'd be like as if I could take this moment and could have an eternity in this moment. You know what I mean? Like I could have it like if I had, like, here's my normal timeline going into the future, right? Imagine if at any given moment I could have an intersecting timeline that just went on in another direction. But I was still in this timeline in that moment. And I had an eternity in that moment. It's something I can't really wrap my mind around that. Like I can talk about it, but I can't really conceptualize what the experiential nature of such an existence would be. Like, how would I experience two-dimensional time or multi-dimensional time? Like time that was 3 or 4 dimensional or 11 dimensional. Like what, and so God does not, I would not expect him to be tied to our cause and effect world. So I'm alive to him whether I live or die. Now, obviously, I want to be kept alive from my experiential personal perspective. That's how I want to be. That's the only part that's meaningful to me. It's great to be alive in the reckoning of God because, but, I'm alive also, though, because he intends that I should live forevermore. What I don't get is like, though God is in the future, I'm not, or am I? Am I already there? I just haven't experienced it yet. You know what I mean? I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus, for the word of God. The two witnesses, I saw them in the streets. I saw, was it just visions? Do they have a vision of someone I know or someone that's to be, who hasn't been born yet? Is that what he saw? You know what I mean? And how could he see them before they were? Would they know they were being seen? Or is it just a vision? Because God can show visions of the futures that he has laid out. The future is known to God. He knows what he knows what my grandchildren are going to look like, if I'm going to have any also. He knows if I'm going to have any grandchildren and what they're going to look like, male, female. He knows all those. All those things are not hidden from him. Neither is my life. So though we have promises to keep alive, we see that in Christ, it can also transcend the grave. Because even though this scripture it's about David, but it also refers to Jesus. Because Jesus was not delivered into the will of his enemies, though it looked like that, right? Judas betrayed him into the hands of his enemies. But we know because of Gethsemane that he was actually delivering himself into the hands of God. As he says on the cross, Father, into your hands do I commend my spirit. As Jesus said, fear not them that kill the body, but afterwards they can't do anything more to you. But fear rather God, who can destroy both body and soul in hell, or in Gehenna, as he said. Because we have too many words for hell in the New Testament and not enough in English. Because in English we use one word for a word that has 3 different words in the Bible. Well, in the Bible, in the New Testament, there's 3 different words for hell, but they're not all referring to the same thing. And there are other words that we don't translate hell that you could very well say, well, that's hell. Tophet in the Old Testament. There's several words in the Old Testament that could be translated hell that are not. So there are multiple words in the Bible translated hell. And it's not at all clear they all mean the same thing. Just to remember that. But Jesus, feared not them and delivered himself to their power by God's will. And was crucified and died. But God restored him to life, as the psalm we read earlier, I think, what was it, 18 or whatever? Thou wilt not leave his soul in hell. Oh, whatever. I don't remember which psalm that is. You can look it up. Peter quoted in the book of Acts, his soul was not left in hell. His soul was not left in the grave. But he was made alive again. So we will be, if not kept alive, we are kept alive in certain circumstances. And though we may be killed. Now I think of I saw somewhere an image, I didn't see the whole video because I don't like to watch such things. But it was a bunch of Christians lined up during the period when ISIS was dominating in Syria and in Iraq. And they were being killed. I think they were being beheaded or whatever. Oh no, it was a bunch of, where was this? Was it in Egypt? Or they were Egyptians? There was a group of Coptic Christians from Egypt, black guys. They were kidnapped in a Muslim country. I think it was Libya, actually. Yeah, they were kidnapped in Libya because Libya is where the lawlessness is, and they were executed. This was recent. I don't know if there was video, but I saw pictures of the men. And, and that's what happens. And it's like, but they're not defeated because of the resurrection. But sometimes, look at, God will not deliver us into the hand of our enemies, but yet sometimes we get delivered in our hands of our enemies. So what does that mean? Well, like I said, like recently, I have a song that's still waiting in the queue to be approved from my publisher. And so I don't want to release the video yet. But like I made the video, I'm like, this might make some people angry. I don't know. I have other songs that I think could anger some people. I'm like, I'm not so vain as to think that they're really going to come after me. I don't think so. I think people just won't notice barely at all. That's the way. It's hard to get people that riled up. I'm not trying to rile people up. Trying to heal things, but some people don't want healing, so they're going to be riled up. There's going to be some people, if they would see it, would be angry. I thought, well, would someone be angry enough to assassinate me? And I thought, well, I'm not going to worry about it, because if they were, well, when I die, I'm going to die at the perfect time. When the Lord wills it, I will die. And it'll be perfect. It'll be the exact right moment to die. I may not feel so right now. I mean, well, that's why there's a certain relativeness. You know what I mean? Like, if I were to go out and just, and then, like, let's say I'm driving along the highway and I see a car pulled over with some guy, he's having trouble at night, and I stop to help him, and 5 men come out of the ditch and throw me in the trunk, and I get suffocated and die and all that, right? Some horrible story like that, right? Some highwayman doing some nasty, wicked business. Maybe they don't even intend to kill you, they just do it accidentally, And I want the Lord to deliver me from things like that. I don't want to go like that. I wouldn't think, that doesn't sound perfect to me. Being assassinated for a song is a little closer, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. You know what I mean? Because if it happens, it happens, and it's good. It's good if that happened. Because I would think it was done for a righteous reason. Meaning I was standing up for something righteous, and I got killed for it. I'm willing to die like that. I mean, I'm not eager to die like that by any means, but that would, between the two, if I had to choose between the two, I'd rather be assassinated for doing something righteous than just killed because someone's greedy. I mean, I don't like to be just ground up in the gears of other people's greed and lack of considering other people. You know what I mean? They don't consider the poor. They consider only themselves. And they take from a man what little he has, even his life. So I don't want God to deliver me into the will of my enemies. That's critical. If I am delivered to death, I want it to be by the will of God. Let the enemies think they're doing their own will, but really they're fulfilling the will of the Lord. Gosh, my ear itches. It's just like a little... It's totally clean. I clean it, but it's slightly infected. It's sore. And it's itching. It's a good thing the study's almost over. Because I really want to just put a Q-tip in there and just... the Lord will strengthen him upon the bed of language. Oh, I didn't read... Yeah. No, not delivering the will of his enemies. Sometimes I feel bad taking so long on 2 verses, but really, it's like... The Lord will not deliver him into a hand... that's not something I think a lot of times I could just pass over. I would be like conscience stricken for not having talked about how, well, sometimes you do get delivered into the hands of the enemy, or at least it looks like it, because it's God's will. But in that case, you're not in the hands of the enemy. You're in the hands of the Lord. Because if highwaymen jump me and kill me, it might just be senseless violence. Like Jesus says, those on whom the Tower of Siloam fell, do you think they were greater sinners than the rest of the people in Jerusalem? No, but I tell you, except you repent, you will in like manner perish. Meaning, our lives are forfeit anyways. I'm already dying for the sins that you know what I mean? Like there's no, and people dying left and right in part of society, they also are sinners dying for sins. We all got to die for our sins. The wages of sin is death. Even the forgiveness of Christ doesn't get you out of that. It gets you a resurrection. So when you live and believe in him, you never die. In the reckoning of God, like he says, he that liveth and believes shall never die. But obviously there's a different, because, all the apostles are dead. But are they? I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living, because to him all live. So the apostles are alive. I don't think they're experiencing life, but to God they are alive because they will walk again. They will rise again. And they're also alive spiritually in the sense because their work goes on. But that's not what we mean, right? I don't want to just be remembered. I don't want to stay alive in people's memories. I want to have memories. That's what it means to be alive. Not to be a memory, They live on in our hearts. That's not where I want to live on. I want to live on in experience, not in hearts. I don't want to live in God's heart. I don't want to live in your heart. I want my heart to live. I want my heart to live and remember and experience. And so that's the deliverance I want. I want to be delivered from my enemies. The last enemy that should be destroyed is death. So ultimately, when God delivers us from death, that is the ultimate deliverance from the enemies, right? So, the Lord will strengthen him upon the bed of languishing, though it make all his bed in his sickness. In this case, David talks about being sick here. I think he was very ill at some point, is written in the. Well, I know he was. He thought maybe he would die, but he recovered, and he did eventually die, of course. But well stricken in years. I mean, like, there's a point where everyone says, when someone is well stricken in years, and that's why people, and it's not, it's still like, I'd like to live to be 120 just because it's possible, and I'd like to live such a blessed and righteous life that it's possible to me. Though many men in my family don't make it half that long because of heart problems. So I don't know. I don't know if I've got what it takes. But when people reach a certain age, like they're after 80, 90, even with the pandemic, people are like, oh, well, they're old people, so, I mean, it's not really when people, and I think that people should probably make it clear, say it only affects old people. Well, I got old people I care about. I don't want to die. Me. So I don't take that as like a light thing. It only affects old folks. So who cares? No, but what it means is, so why not let the kids go back to school? And it's funny coming from a homeschooling guy, but I'm very particular about the way I homeschool my kids. The way they're doing it to kids these days, I would not do that. And considering one of the biggest comorbidities is obesity, the fact that they're delaying sports for kids in a country where we have the fattest kids. I don't know if we have the fattest kids in the world, but we have an obesity epidemic even with our children. They're not getting enough athletic exercise, and we're telling them to distance from people and stay inside. I was telling my friend, you know why when wrestling season begins, my kids get sick more often than other kids? It's because my kids don't go to school. So my kids don't get as much exposure to a lot of the germs that other kids do. And so they actually become more susceptible. Of course, they make up for it, I think, during wrestling season because you get a lot of contact, you get exposed to a lot of germs, and they get their immune system worked out, but in a very uneven fashion. And what are they doing? They are isolating these children and turning them into, and not even giving, and taking away opportunities, and weakening their immune system. And I really think that what we are doing in many states amounts to state-sponsored child abuse. Is what it amounts to. Not my kids, because it's like, I said, for me, my lifestyle really hasn't changed. We were homeschooling already. I was already work remotely, It's just the destruction of the economics engine, it's like I had contracts canceled on me. Just because of the pandemic. They're just like, oh, because of this, we're shutting down. And we don't, we want to work for you for months. Maybe they'll go away forever, But what they're doing to kids in this, I was listening on the radio, they were talking about, like, have your child wear his mask at home to get used to it. Because in school, like, can you imagine being a kid again? I remember what it's like in school. They got you there. They make you do everything. I told my wife, there's no way I would ever subject my kids to school. At least from my experience, the way I experienced it, no way. And, like, I can go into a store and I can pull down my mask. If, like, let's say I'm alone at a store. And I'm at Walmart. I go in and I slip the mask on so the people at the door don't yell at me. I walk in and I see there's no crowds. Everyone's distant, so I pull it down. I don't need to. I'm alone. I'm effectively alone in this building because there's no one within 6 feet of me. And I can keep people away from me indefinitely. so I can follow the safety procedures, right? So I do that. Why do I do it? Why did I even bring it up? I'm sorry, we're talking about sickness. But, but imagine being a kid in school. I'm not going to let go of this. I want to talk about this just briefly. Imagine being a kid in school. You're alone on the playground. You want to pull your mask off. Don't do that. Put that back on. Because they don't give kids any leeway. They're going to be totally oppressed under this, and it's not good for them. People say, well, don't you think masks are effective? Sure I do. They're short-term effective at preventing things from getting into your mouth or things getting out of your mouth. Sure. Depending on how good the mask is, it's going to depend on how good it does the job, but it's going to be better than an unfiltered face, right? But the idea that you're going to wear a mask every day of your life, right? Unless that mask is a true, like the N95, like filter out all particulate, eventually what'll happen is, like, if you wore a mask every day, like just a simple one, like the one I wear. Oh, it's right here. Look at this. My pretend mask. Because this doesn't work. This is just a t-shirt. Right? And then I go like this. There we go. Now I'm wearing my mask. This is how I walk into stores all the time. And of course, you can get in trouble if, I live in a very conservative area, so, don't necessarily think it's going to work in your city. Yeah, here we go. I got my mask on. Oh, there it is. It's gone. Anyways, if I wear this every day of my life, right? Every day, every minute, eventually it'll be as if I'm not wearing one. Because my immune system is so suppressed that it becomes so vulnerable that it takes a lot less germs to get me sick. That's my opinion on that matter. Because any safety feature you implement like that is going to eventually not be effective. Because your body will stop doing it for itself. It's like, oh, I've got sore legs. Or I've got let's say I've got a walking problem, right? I got a little limp or whatever. I don't know what it is. I'm trying to think of some sort of thing. Let me see. I got a problem. Well, let's say I don't want to sprain my ankles get sprained, right? My ankles get sprained. They do. When I was in high school in football, I stepped in a hole. And on the football field, there was a hole. For some reason, I remember my coach was so angry. He's like, "What? I sprained my ankle." He's like, "What happened?" He thought I was just being clumsy or something. I'm like, "There's a hole," and he looked at it and he's like, he called the groundskeeper over. He was all angry, and it took me out for like a week. But you know what? I have weak ankles now, or especially one. The right one's really bad. So, what do I do about it? I have weak ankles. Shall I? Maybe I should go around in a wheelchair so I never sprain my ankle again. You know what I mean? Well, what'll happen is I'll never walk again after a while. If I sit in that wheelchair all the time, I won't be able to get out. Eventually, I will lose the ability to walk. I'll atrophy. I always use the wheelchair because, what I mean? And I'm not talking about people who are genuinely need a wheelchair. I'm talking about me. I just got ankles. No, what I need to do is walk on those ankles to strengthen them. Maybe do some exercises to strengthen them so they don't sprain so easy. Staying off them all the time will only make them weaker. And keeping your mouth covered all the time only makes you weaker. I know. It's and the blindness of people to the multiple, it's sad because it's like, I think that our experts have let us down and we trust the scientists. Scientists, you trust them? But they're more trustworthy than other people? More trustworthy than politicians? Less likely to lie than what, like a religious leader? They don't all lie? They don't all have ulterior motives? Not every statement by a scientist is a statement of science. Just remember that. Sometimes this worship of scientists among the political class makes me want to vomit. All right, so we're done for today. I hope we will finish this up tomorrow. Whatever, we'll finish this week for almost sure, Lord willing, right? We'll pick it up at verse 3. Sorry it took a long time. Sorry I got astray, but I think it's critical to understanding because sometimes you do die, but always you live because of Christ. You know what I mean? So we're never defeated. But in the Psalms, that's not obvious. He's praying. He's like, don't deliver me. And I know that if you do well, you're not going to deliver me into the hands of my enemies. Right? If I do well, God's not going to deliver me wantonly. Though Job, right? Job. That was his friend's argument. Well, God wouldn't deliver you into the hands of your enemy unless you did something. Life can be complicated. So we'll pick it up with verse 3 tomorrow, and hopefully we'll wrap it up. We'll see. I'm not going to rush on purpose. There's no way. I thought about reading the whole psalm and kind of blasting through it today. I'm like, that's not how I like to do things. So thanks for joining me. We'll be back again tomorrow, most likely, and Friday, hopefully. One or the other finishing. After that, we're going to take a break from Psalms and go into, I think, Colossians was what I was planning on doing. All right, we'll see you tomorrow.
I will declare the decree. Yahweh has said to me, Thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I will give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel.